Am I okay? Am I screen sharing with you guys?
Not yet.
Okay, how about now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Let me get this pulled up. Okay, so are you guys just seeing once it's loaded the presenter? It's good. Okay. All right. My name is Alyssa Otto, and I created a wellness guide for sonographers. I myself am a sonographer, so this relates to me, and it's something that I actually have been using since I created it. Okay, so let's begin by just talking about what is ultrasound. Ultrasound is an imaging modality that uses sound waves to create images of soft tissue organs in the body. The ultrasound machines are large machines with transducers that we use to scan and buttons that we use to manipulate the images. And we can scan everything in the body, very well known for babies, but we can scan anything else: livers, gallbladders, spleens, blood vessels, muscles, everything. I myself am a sonographer. I've been working at Strong Memorial Hospital for about 3 years now. I have experience with abdominal, vascular, small parts, gynecology, pediatrics, transplants, and neonatal ultrasound. And as a sonographer, I experience upper back, neck, and shoulder pain from how demanding the job is. Okay, why is it important for sonographers to take care of their bodies? Did you know that 90% of sonographers experience work-related pain, and 1 in 5 sonographers sustain career-ending injuries on the job? According to literature, over the past 15 years of studying the injuries of sonographers, 75% of sonographers say they experience shoulder pain, 65% experience neck pain, and 50% experience wrist pain. This can be due to the main things: force exerted while scanning a patient. When you're scanning a patient, you're gripping the transducer, you're pushing on the patient's body, you're pushing large machines around the hospital, you're positioning patients. It's a lot of force that you're using. A lot of repetitive motions. We're scanning the same exams all day long. We're doing the same things, cleaning the stretcher down the same way, moving a patient to the bed the same way. Lots of repetitive motions and lots of awkward positions while you're scanning. Very often there's lots of machines in the room and you're in a very strange position trying to reach to your patient and get the images you need. It's really important for sonographers to take care of their bodies to prolong their careers, and studies have shown that maintaining ergonomic postures while scanning can keep the muscles from becoming fatigued while scanning and therefore limit the stress that is on the joints of the sonographer. Some ways that you can also help yourself in this field is by stretching, doing yoga, and doing strength training, because it leads to reduction in neck and back pain. And what puts a sonographer at risk for injury? Non-adjusting equipment. Here on the side here, you see a picture of the machine that I actually use at my job currently. A lot of machines don't adjust. You can adjust the height, you can move them around. My machine thankfully does, but there are a lot of machines out there that you can't adjust. So you have to reach and strain to get to your machine. And that's really uncomfortable and puts a lot of stress on your body. The weight of the equipment, here's my machine right here. We just got those about a year ago. And our clinical technician told us they were 280 pounds, which is the lightest machine on the market right now. That's a full-size machine. And I'm pushing this around the hospital all day long. It's very heavy. The increased BMI of the population can cause a lot of injuries as people are getting bigger. The majority of my patients are obese or morbidly obese. And you need to push a lot harder on these patients, and it's a lot harder to reach the certain body parts that you're scanning on these patients. There's a very limited time between exams because we all have busy schedules. I usually have like 5 minutes to write my case up between exams, and that's not enough time to relax and stretch and get ready for the next exam. And the most common reason that sonographers experience injury is lack of awareness. According to a study by Alschuwer and Gilman, where 24 articles were reviewed about workplace-related musculoskeletal disorders, the most common cause of shoulder injuries among sonographers was lack of awareness. And between sonographers and supervisors, just completely unaware of the importance of taking care of their body and like resting between exams. Okay, so what are some of the solutions to this? Like I said before, take breaks between the exams to let your body heal. Diversify the types of exams that you do in a day. That's not always possible. If you have a larger department, you can switch exams with coworkers so you're not scanning the same thing over and over again. Practice ergonomic scanning postures, which we'll get to later on in my presentation. Stretching regularly, strength training, that's also coming up in my PowerPoint. And then, like we said, lack of awareness is the biggest issue. So educating sonographers. Sonographers need to understand the physiology of the muscles and understanding static posture versus dynamic work. When you're working in a static posture, the muscles are being kept from receiving the blood that would eliminate waste products. So therefore, there's a buildup of waste in the muscles, and that causes your muscles to become more tired and more pain. And we'll talk about the benefits of yoga, stretching, and strength training. It's important for sonographers to strengthen their muscles to prevent injuries. And let's talk about ergonomics. So ergonomics is very important when it comes to scanning. It keeps your muscles from becoming fatigued. So it's important to position the patient close to you and your machine close to you. If you can adjust equipment, move the machine so you're not reaching for it. It's at the proper height and proper distance. If you keep your shoulder abducted at less than a 30-degree angle and your elbow at a 90-degree angle, it keeps your muscles from becoming fatigued. The more abducted your shoulder is, which is this motion, the more tired your shoulder will get and the more pain you'll feel. And I can attest to that. So the ergonomic scanning is very important. Which muscles are most often strained? Pectoralis major, biceps brachialis, levator scapulae, scalenes, upper traps, and the erector spinae. All these muscles are used in abducting the arm, reaching, pushing, turning the neck, which we do a lot to see the machine, see the patient, posture, your spine, keeping a good posture, and moving your shoulder. All of these muscles, I feel the pain after a long day of work in all these areas. Okay, so let's talk about some of the yoga exercises. So in the book that I created, my wellness guide, I have more of the yoga stretches and exercises, but I just put a few for my presentation. Here in the very first picture on the top of the page, you can see the cobra pose. This will strengthen the back and it should alleviate back pain. You can repeat it as many times as you want, lying face down on a yoga mat, lift your chest up, looking straight ahead with your arms at your side, and hold it for about a minute. Bridge pose is the next photo down. This will stretch your spine and your levator scapula back here. And this is laying face down with your arms at your sides, lift your butt off the ground and hold it, and keep your head up, looking straight ahead. Cat pose is more dynamic. You start in the first position you see in the first picture down here, just hands and knees on the mat, looking face down. And then as you exhale, lift your back and your chest up towards the ceiling and repeat as you breathe. And you could just repeat this stretch over and over again. And that will stretch the back and the neck. Okay, so here are a few examples of the stretches for sonographers. In the first photo here, we see the anterior shoulder stretch. You just find a door frame, put your arm against it with your elbow at a 90-degree angle, and you turn your body away from your arm until you start to feel stretch, and that'll stretch your biceps and your pecs. And then the other stretch that I wanted to include because it's one stretch, but there's 3 variations, so it stretches a lot. The neck stretch, you just sit in a chair, literally do it anywhere. You guys can do it right now. Sit in a chair, sit on one of your hands, and with the other hand, just grab your head and pull it down towards your shoulder. Another variation is to, as you pull your head down on the back of your head, you lift your head away from you and you look up. And another variation, same thing, you pull your head down towards your shoulder and you look down at your knee and you just hold it like that. And this will stretch several things in the neck and the shoulder, the levator scapulae, the scaling muscles, the upper traps, just your neck in general. I do this all the time at work. It feels amazing and it definitely helps. And then some of the strength training exercises, there are several in my booklet, but I just wanted to include some of the main ones that I've been using. The one that I took pictures of here, this is more of a static exercise. Y's, T's, W's, and M's is what it's called. Here you lie face down on a mat, And you touch your big toes together, keep your heels apart, and you squeeze your knees together. And this is what activates the muscles in your back. And there's 4 different poses, and you just hold them. It's not a dynamic thing. You're not moving around. So you can see Y, you hold your arms off the ground at a 45-degree angle with your thumbs up. T, make a T shape, arms out. W, arms at your side like this, and M, arms straight up. It's actually, it looks like it's easy, but it is not. It's very difficult. And you hold this for about 6 seconds each time you do it. 6 seconds on, 6 seconds off, and you repeat 6 times. And you just go through each one. This is going to strengthen your back. And it's very important during this exercise, keep your knees squeezed together because that's what activates the muscles in your back. And then I have a few videos over here, which I hope this works. It links to a YouTube video. And I've tried it, so it should work. Serve the platter. This is going to strengthen the back and the shoulders. And you can see in the video, she's pushing her arms away from her body while pushing her pinkies together. So let's see if this works. You guys seeing this, right? Cool. I'll maybe play it a couple times. Okay, here we go. Pushing her arms out and away and then back. And let's watch it again. And as she does it, she like pushes her hips back. And this is supposed to strengthen the shoulders and the back. It's very important to strengthen. You need to push your pinkies together as you do it. And you can feel it when you do it, you'll feel that. Okay. I think I'm just gonna have to go out of the full screen mode. Okay. And then the shoulder trace, this is going to strengthen, loosen and stretch the shoulder muscles. You're going to see in the video, she's going to trace the length of her body and up behind her head and above her head and follow it back down. So we can watch this one a couple of times. So she's going up her body, flipping her hands behind her head and back down. And just tracing her body.
You have a couple of minutes, Alyssa.
Say that again?
You have a couple of minutes only.
Okay, I just wanted to watch this one more time, just because I think it wasn't full screen mode. But yeah, so you can do this easily. You're supposed to be standing forever. You can do it sitting down. And yeah, doing this multiple times. I do it like 10 times in a row, and it definitely starts to stretch out your shoulders. And I have one last video. This is called Wall Angels. This has a variation where you can do it on the floor. It's kind of easier to start on the floor if you have really tight shoulders like I do, but then you eventually want to move up to the wall where it's a little bit harder. You're sitting against the wall, kind of doing a wall sit, and you lift your arms above your head, keeping them against the wall. It sounds like it's easy. It's so not easy if you are tight in the shoulders like I am. So here's a quick video of that. And back down. And we'll watch one more time. All right, so in conclusion, I have been using these strength training exercises, stretches, the yoga practices since I started this project. And like I said, I have so many issues with my shoulders and my neck because of my job, and I've definitely felt a difference since I've started using this. So it is a product that's meant to be used by an ultrasound department or a sonographer themselves, just everyday practice on the job, something to refer to between exams, between patients, to stretch and get ready for the next exam so you're not in pain and you're at less risk for injury. And that's it.
Thanks, Alyssa. And I would just comment that I've seen the actual book.
Yeah, you looked at it.
Do you have a picture of the booklet here?
I can pull it up since I'm screen sharing. I can go to my.
It would just be great for everybody to see what the final, since you do have an actual artifact.
Yeah.
So
I have it.
Alyssa does have this bound booklet, that is one of her final deliverables, which she's given to me, and she's reprinting it for the symposium. But but that's an important piece of what when you refer to, the booklet that you've put together. I think it'd be great to show it here.
Yeah, I'll flip through. Sorry, I was logged into my RIT account, so I had to get out of that.
No, that's fine. So while you're looking for, well, actually, I see it is pulled up. I'll go ahead and ask. I've got a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't looked at your the guide in detail, but it's got lots of those high quality photos of the model that is working through different poses, which is fantastic. So I guess my question would be, so I'm assuming as part of the the certification process that you have to go through to be a sonographer, that there's a fair amount of anatomy and physiology that's part of that.
Oh yeah.
Is integrated into your education. You seem to know a lot about, and maybe it's through the research, maybe it's through your own interest out of a need to get some relief for some of the injury and pain that you're experiencing, but is some of this integrated into the education? Do you feel like it should be more than it is, so that people are going into this field recognizing that immediately I need to start, instead of more preventative, less, treating the injury as it occurs?
So I didn't really learn much about this in school. Of course, depending on the school you go to and the program you go through, I'm sure that your education is slightly different. But I didn't really learn much about this in school. I do remember learning about ergonomics a little bit, but pretty much all of this was through research and meeting with massage therapists and chiropractors and talking about my personal experience. But yes, what you're saying, it should be a preventative thing, because I work with 20 other sonographers, and a lot of them have been in the field for a very long time, and they've all had surgeries and stuff, they could have prevented it and they didn't know. So yes, I do think it should be part of a curriculum for school.
So what would be really interesting is if you were to take this to the next level. So obviously you feel really passionate about helping colleagues in preventing some of this injury. Is this something you plan to share far and wide? Is this something that you can share? Has your research, so that's one question. I guess my other question is, do you think that it would be possible, viable, would it be profitable even to offer a 30-minute stretch? Like I hear when I'm shopping at Wegmans, but a 30-minute stretch for sonographers at some point throughout the day, where they have a space where they go to and a video is playing and they hop in and they do some stretching. Like that an option, or have you seen anything like that?
So I remember as a student, I saw a poster on the wall at one of my clinical sites, and that's about it for this kind of stuff. Where I work at Strong, I definitely could bring in a copy of this and leave it there if I wanted to. I told a few of my coworkers that I was doing this, and they asked me to do that, actually, to bring this in. So yeah, that'd be cool. I haven't thought about far and wide, like you said, but at least where I work, yes, I would totally leave this book there. Anyone can flip through it and follow along between patients or on their lunch break. And then the last part you said, if they took some time to stretch, like I said, you need to take time between exams, and that's not possible, especially nowadays. We've never been so busy at the hospital. But according to stuff that I researched, you should, between every patient, take time to relax and rest, and then stretch in preparation for the next exam, which that's kind of up to management and your supervisor to create a schedule that you have time to do that. But if there isn't time, at least, something throughout the day to go flip through the book, watch a video, and do some stretches, because it really is important.
And they may not see it as cost effective at this point, even though I hear what you're saying and that it does end people's careers. So, okay, I've taken enough time. Stephen, you want to jump in?
Actually, we're at 2:21. One quick question. Well, I have several, but so a lot of the solutions that you wrote on that slide sounded like there weren't solutions that you could do those if you had your supervisors okay. So I imagine that's pretty variable, depends on your supervisor.
Yeah, and it depends on where you work. I think outpatient facilities that have a schedule, it could be easier for a supervisor to create a schedule that works for you. I work at a hospital, so it's just as they come and it's nonstop. But then again, perhaps hiring an extra sonographer or two so the work is divvied up and you're not scanning 25 patients in a shift, you know. But yes, like you said, as in the previous slide that you were talking about, on the last bullet point there, lack of awareness is one of the main reasons for injury, and that like applies to sonographers themselves plus management. Like management isn't necessarily aware of how important this is. So yes, you're correct.
Are sonographers unionized?
Not at my job, but it depends on where you work. My old job, we were union,
Yeah.
but not my current job.
So I just to follow up from what Meg was saying. So you have a booklet. Have you shared this booklet with the RIT department, the major? I mean, do they know about this?
Yes, I work with Hamad Ghazli. We're coworkers at Strong. So he knows about it. And yeah, that I feel like I should talk to him a little bit more about it. I haven't talked to him about it as much as I probably should have, like about sharing it with his class.
Okay, I think that would be really. I know Hamad too. I'll tell him that he should do that. So
Yeah,
you just have one copy? Is it just one
yes,
copy?
I have one that I gave to Meg, but I have obviously the Word document, so I can easily print that out.
So
It doesn't even have to be a book. I could just print out copies at work.
Yeah. I think you need multiple copies of this. I can see a lot of use for it. I mean, like I told you when the semester began, we have a number of sonographers in this program, and oftentimes this is sort of the topic. But you produce something that is like Meg said, it's something you can hold in your hand and say, look, you really need to pay attention to this, and this is what you should do. So I think there's a lot of potential for good use to this. So congratulations on pulling it together. It looks like a great booklet too. I mean, you must have, I don't know if you had previous experience with creating something like that, but it looks really professional. So good for you.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we're going to go on to Jay, I guess, is next up alphabetically. Jay?
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay.
And now I can see your slide.
Okay. You can see all the starting slide?
Send to the Elderitch ones, yes.
Yes. So my name is Jay, and my capstone project is Assent of the Elderitch Ones, a slice of life and dark fantasy visual novel about a student's first week at a strange magic academy. So first, I want to talk about why I decided to do this project. Before transferring into SOIS, I used to be a student in the game design and development program. Ever since I was a kid, I've liked video games, and my favorite kinds of games are the ones that have a strong narrative and focus on the quality of the plot and writing as much as the game mechanics. Because not only do I like video games, but I also like writing. I typically write prose fiction, and I especially love creating stories and characters and worlds of my own. And so I decided to combine those two passions, writing and video games, into one project to demonstrate my skills in design, programming, and writing, and to create a portfolio piece to show to potential future employers. I knew that the perfect kind of game for me to create in order to show those skills off would be a visual novel. A visual novel is an interactive story where the player is the main character. They're the one who has to make the big decisions, and their decisions are the ones that affect the plot the most. The main thing that separates a visual novel from a lot of other games is that in a visual novel, the player doesn't physically control a character model to like move around and explore an area with. The gameplay of a visual novel is mostly just reading and then clicking whenever a decision needs to be made. So what the visual novel lacks in those areas compared to other games, it has to make up for in the writing and visuals. Numerous elements go into creating a visual novel, but for my project specifically, I initially broke it down into 3 critical design elements: narrative, characters, and visuals. The first is narrative design, which is the structure of the story and how player choice will affect it. So the image on the screen right now is a flowchart that I created while I was planning out one of the potential plot threads in the game. So at the point of the story, represented by the box currently outlined in red, the player is given two options, which results in the story splitting into two branches. Branches are essentially different versions of the plot, kind of like alternate timelines. The differences between branches can vary from being very minor to very major. For this example in particular, in branch 1, something bad happens to the player's roommate, but in branch 2, the player is able to get help to prevent that bad thing from happening. The structure of the overarching plot is a bit more complex. So to give some context first and to give a little bit of synopsis, the player is a new student at a at a school called Icon Academy, and it's the first year of the first week of the fall semester. Icon Academy is a school that specializes in teaching magic to its students through service to Elderitch otherworldly beings. The academy as a whole is devoted to three beings in particular, commonly referred to as heart, body, and mind. So during this first week, all students are monitored and scrutinized by these three beings in preparation for the important tradition at the end of the week called the Assent ceremony. And during the Assent ceremony, each new student is chosen by one of those three beings, and those beings base their decision off of what the student decided to do with their first week of school. To translate that into game mechanics, the player has three main stats: heart, body, and mind. And every day the player is given a list of activities to choose how they want to spend their blocks of free time, one block in the afternoon and then one block in the evening. The image on the right is basically the full list of activity options, except for one club activity that's missing because the club choices change depending on the day. And so whatever activity the player decides to do affects the main stats. For example, if the player wants to study at the library, then their mind stat increases. And those activities also lead to character interactions and potential subplots. Another example, the flowchart on the previous slide, that's the roommate subplot that the player can access if they attend a cult club. And so eventually all these branches culminate into multiple endings with different variations, with the main variation being if the player gets chosen by heart, body, or mind, depending on which main set is highest. The player also gets to see endings for all of the subplots that they took part in. Moving on to the next element, character design. For this game, I really focused on creating characters that the player can connect with, because if the player gets invested in a character, then it helps them get more immersed in the story because they want to see what happens to that character. So I created 6 main interactable characters, each with their own unique perspective of the academy. The first 4 characters here are all students. From left to right, Cairo the first year, Damien the second year, Minji the third year, and Sabrina the fourth year. The intention is for the player to befriend at least one, maybe all of them, and to gain insight from their own experiences at Icon Academy. The 5th character, Zagan, the one with the long white hair, is actually a student who's already graduated, and they're technically not supposed to be on campus, but for some reason they are. Their role is to give the player some lore about the Academy's history, as well as its relationship to the world outside of campus bounds. And the 6th character, the rightmost character, is Rizza. He's the Academy's headmaster. He's also the youngest headmaster, and there are a lot of rumors about him that the player might be able to catch. So for each player, I basically created a profile containing information such as name, age, pronouns, appearance, personality, and motivations. I also compiled reference images for their appearances and outfits so that I could get a better feel and vision of each character, and also because I commissioned someone to do all of the character art, so I needed to communicate to them what I was looking for. The third element is visual design. As I mentioned earlier, the gameplay of a visual novel is mostly reading and clicking. So The visual novel really needs good writing and visuals in order to help better immerse the player into the game. For the menus of the game, the program that I used to create my game actually came with preset menus, so I didn't really need to code that from scratch. And the main thing that I did with the menus was I created a title image to put as the background for the main menu. For the in-game backgrounds, I looked for copyright-free and public domain images and then edited them to better suit the intended aesthetic and atmosphere of Icon Academy. I basically made them all black and white, and I added filters to make them seem a little more uncertain and mysterious. And the dialog box. The dialog box is basically where almost all of the narration and dialogue appears. For that, I also found a public domain image to use for it. And so this screenshot is basically to show all of those elements combined. The black and white background, that's the background specifically for the dormitory. These two bars right here with the text on them, that's actually the option menu that comes up whenever the player needs to make a decision. Down here, this is the dialog box, the one that looks like parchment paper. And then the purple box on top of it is called the name box. Whenever someone is speaking, the name box shows who's speaking, the name of the character speaking. And so looking back on this project, I did have quite a few problems. The first problem being playtesting. Playtesting is the process of getting people to play your game and then give you feedback on what to improve. I was only able to get a handful of people to give me feedback, and while it was constructive, I wish I had gotten a lot more. The way I did playtesting was mostly informal. I reached out to some other social groups that I'm in, consisting of other writers, developers, and visual novel players. Basically advertised my game and asked and said I was looking for playtesters. So I couldn't really keep track of the total number of people who played my game and what percentage of those people didn't actually end up giving me feedback. Next, I definitely overscoped. I both underestimated how much time and work would go into completing the full vision of the game and overestimated how much I would get done. In particular, I feel like I should have started with 4 characters, maybe even less, and then added a few more later on. I also kept getting distracted with coming up with new ideas and then wanting to add them. Lastly, I feel like I should have approached the coding in a more efficient way. So instead, what I did was I started coding at the story's chronological beginning, but I feel like I should have started coding at the main part of the game, basically where the daily activity options start. I actually added a day 0, because I wanted to use that day to introduce the character, to introduce the player to the setting and then ease them into the story rather than just abruptly drop them right in. But then the writing and programming for day 0 took more time than I intended. I did, fortunately, manage to finish coding the structure of the main part of the game, all the daily activity options and the time progression, but I still need to fill that in with the actual writing and content. Despite those problems, though, I enjoyed working on this project, and I feel like that I created a good foundation for me to continue to build on in the future. I definitely will finish this game and polish it up to make it look a little more professional, and as well as add a few other features and eventually publish it online. And that's all. Thank you. And are there any questions?
Yes, Jay, I have a question. Well, it's not a question to begin with. I'm blown away by what you've just shown us. The first question is, did you find time to do anything else at all this semester other than work on this game?
I mean, I found time to, luckily I only had one other class to take, so I found time to do,
Wow.
do that class.
This is, I mean, it's immensely complex that what you've done. I can't tell from your presentation how far, you know, what you've still got to do, but the whole structure of the thing is just amazing. Like I say, I'm blown away. So it looks absolutely fantastic, and I really encourage you to go to finish it. I mean, I can't imagine that it wouldn't have a place in the market. It's really good. You know, I don't know much about games, or certainly not about this particular kind. I mean, we talked at the beginning of the semester about how it's, you know, how decades ago now, Choose Your Own Adventure stories came out. So it's sort of like that, but so much more than that. So I really hope you go ahead and make a lot of money out of this, I guess. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Meg.
Thanks. So Jay, I would certainly echo Stephen's enthusiasm on the undertaking. I would imagine there was a fair amount of project management involved here, especially since you had to outsource the design of the characters. I mean, I'm assuming that you came up with what you wanted them, the general appearance of what you wanted, and then someone else designed them for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is this a story that you had previously written, or was that also a part of this semester?
No, this is a completely new story, actually a completely new setting, and also all except like two of the characters are loosely based, two of the characters are loosely based off of two previous characters that I've had. All the other characters are completely new though.
Okay, fantastic. So I guess I would ask, I see lots of really career relevant, material here, and I'm assuming that you provided great background information and great rationale for why you're choosing this project. So I'm assuming this will go into a portfolio.
Yes.
What would you say, as part of your very authentic feedback on what you learned, which I really appreciated, what would you say is maybe the most career relevant thing that you learned in terms of, how would you translate some of what you learned into the professional setting? What would you say is the biggest takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway for me was basically, so I'd never made a visual novel before, and I also never really used an engine, the engines that I use. So the biggest takeaway for me would be that the ability to learn a new engine and a new language in time to start the project.
So maybe like just, you mean the time required or your ability?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Well, I really enjoyed it. And I hope that you're able to, at the Capstone Symposium, are you planning to have your laptop there so people could move through the game?
I actually won't be able to physically attend because I'm several hours away. I am planning on finding like maybe do a QR code thing or have a link to download if people want to play.
That'd be great. And I think similar to what you've included in the slides is having some really sharp visuals that give the audience an understanding of what the game looks like would be really important. But a QR code is a great idea. Nice job.
Yeah, thank you.
So Jay, before we go on to Jay's, I'm quite certain that if you can put this up in some accessible way at the symposium, you'll get a lot of players. And also, I think you should try and find some way to send it to J.K. Rowling, because I'm sure she would be very pleased to see something like this. And with that, let's go on to Jase.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jase Riveria. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. I want to mention two things. One, I'm just starting to get a little bit sick, so I'm sorry if I have to stop at any moment to, cough or do any of the fun things that you have to do when you're sick. And two, I just want to say I'm honored to be around both Alyssa and Jay. Both projects have been so good. I'm so honored to be here in this space with you. So getting started with my project, again, my name is Jase Rivera, and my project is Dynamics of Communication, how ASL interpreters can look inward. So I'm a staff member working at the Department of Access Services as a sign language interpreter here at RIT. And for the project, I set out to create a workshop for my colleagues, my fellow interpreters, to engage in to facilitate their learning on the matter of interpersonal communication. We access providers work every day in the world of language, and I wanted to shed some light on the work that we do. I wanted to provide some insight into some tools that we do and the tools that we can use for our work, and also validate that our work is actually really quite challenging. So moving forward, sign language interpreters work in a practice profession. So you can think nurses and teachers. Much like nurses and teachers, we need to always keep apprised with the current standards of our job through attaining continuing education units. That helps us maintain certification and also just keep up to date with things that are going on with our profession. Luckily, here at RIT, the Department of Access Services actually has its own professional development program that provides opportunities for professional development specifically to interpreters and other access providers that work in that setting as well. I proposed to the program that I run a workshop just like what I mentioned to you just now, and they immediately said, please do so. This would be awesome. As I did my as I did my research for this project, I realized that there is something else not much discussed in our department specifically, and that's the idea of mentorship and mentoring. And my research seemed to more and more apply to the workshop, where I provide a space for interpreters to understand the vital role that they can play for their fellow professionals, a role that they're already playing, and also the roles in which their peers are already playing for them in everyday relationships. So my initial proposal for the workshop is what I actually ended up keeping as the workshop description that interpreters signed up with. I realized that the amazing thing about our field is that any discussion about communication can be applied both to us personally and also to the work that we do. I designed the workshop to have a wide application for anyone to glean what it is they wish to, whether they were learning more about interpersonal communication as a whole and maybe applying that to their relationships with their colleagues and peers, or also if they wanted to learn more about interpersonal communication and how that affects our jobs every day. I do admittedly focus on the aspect of mentorship though. I just realized that there was a lack of motivation with many of my peers to take on a mentorship role. And I remembered how vital those roles had always been for me, how vital they continue to be for me, and also our profession as a whole. So I apply most of the discussions to examples that are easily applicable to a mentor-mentee type relationship. I also pay note to the fact that often we work one-on-one with our peers in interpreting situations. And in those interactions, we're constantly playing both supporter and person needing support, which can easily be thought of as mentee and mentor. So as I developed the workshop, I put myself into the shoes of the people who are going to be attending, the participants of the workshop. I wanted them to be able to fully engage in the content and find value in it wherever it was that they found themselves in their professional journey. I felt it was really important to allow them a space to learn, but also a space to look inward and think about experiences that they have had in their past, maybe ones that they're thinking of having and are having right now, and share them with the group and maybe even write them down in a guided fashion. I was hoping that they would do both. And because of this goal, I took my research and created a packet of worksheets that they could follow along with as I lead the workshop. And right here, you can see a couple examples from the worksheets that I made. So there's a packet of about, I think, 16 to 20 pages that when interpreters come to my workshop, they can look at the worksheet as I'm teaching things or as I'm talking about certain things, and they can write notes, things that connect to them and their relationship that they've had with other people, things that they're thinking of in the moment of, oh, I wonder if that applies to the situation. And hopefully, as that's happening, they want to raise their hands and discuss that with us in the group. There's no requirement for people to fill any of these out during or even after the presentation, but for those who prefer pen and paper while engaging in content, I wanted to just provide that space for them. So the workshop was really meant to elicit conversations among my colleagues about the interpreting process and the relationships that we hold together. Throughout the workshop, I take breaks and ask for examples from the participants' personal or professional lives. And those worksheets that I just mentioned really help with that. I also have preloaded examples just to get conversations started if the group happens to be more timid. I just find that if we can tie things to our personal lives or our professional lives, the strategies for better communication skills tend to sink in a little bit more just because we can actively talk about those with situations that we've had. This slide on the screen you're seeing right now is just a snippet of one of the slides that I used during the workshop itself. So I talk about how sometimes we have disputes or miscommunications with people, and we might not understand why it is that we're having this issue. And often it's just because the way that we communicate is just so different from each other. So it could be because of degrees of directness. I might be really blunt with you and you might not talk that way. Another thing is meta messages. And meta messages, you can kind of think of it as when they say, it's not what you said, it's the way you said it. That's what meta messages is. Other things like intonation, apologizing, the volume at which you speak, all of those things communicate things to someone else that you might not know of as you're the one who's communicating. So as I'm discussing the slide, they have their worksheets in front of them. I ask them in the group, in what ways have you had a miscommunication with someone in the past? And what did they do to cause that miscommunication? What did they do to influence that issue, dispute, or miscommunication? We discussed that for a while, and then I kind of throw a wrench in their plans and discuss, okay, so now how did you contribute to that? Because communication, as we all know, is a two-way street, if not 3 or 4 many other streets as well. So I want to discuss that with them and discuss other options and other ways and strategies to kind of get out of those situations if we can. A lot of mentoring experiences allow us to break the box that we often find ourselves in. And as I mentioned, I kind of geared this more towards a mentorship type of workshop. And brain teasers are a great tool to get interest from a group, especially in an endeavor to increase the motivation for someone to become a mentor, or at the very least become more passionate about supporting our peers. So thinking outside the box is something that we're often told to do. But in the practice of interpreting and mentorship, it's harder to find that box. So the participants and I in the workshop are able to have these discussions and hopefully break down some of the barriers people feel in their jobs and in their relationships. So on the screen here, you're seeing a little 9 dots on the screen. And if you had a worksheet in front of you that I made, you would actually have those same dots on your paper. And I would ask you, connect all 9 of these dots using 4 consecutive straight lines. So put your pen down on the paper and without lifting it up in 4 straight lines, connect all the dots. If you're trying to do this right now in your head, you might be having a difficult time doing that. So it's important to remember where our colleagues are, where they want to go, and how we can support them getting there. So if my colleagues are really trying to do what I've asked them to do, connecting all these dots, I'll say something to the effect of, there is no box. They typically will get to this answer eventually. We, as people, see a box of dots when really it's just 9 dots on a paper. So breaking that kind of idea in front of them kind of helps them understand what my goal is in the workshop, to help them break out of that idea of, this is exactly how things need to be. I need to be this type of mentor. I need to be this type of interpreter and all these things. But really, that isn't the case all the time. So I try to break that out from people's minds. I'm not sure I have too much time to go into how they will get an A, but basically one of the books that I used for research in this project was in the next slide. I'll show you which book that is, but they talk about how in a mentor-mentee relationship, a mentor can really empower their mentee by asking them to write the mentor a letter, thinking as if they're in the future, saying, during this experience, I got an A, or I was successful because I did this, 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 and this. And it helps both the mentee and the mentor understand what things I can do, what things we can do together to get you to where a successful place you want to be. These are the resources that I talked about just now. That middle book, The Art of Possibility, is where you get that give them an A idea. All 3 of these books are the research that I used. I read them and I wrote down notes and I applied all of the ideas that all 3 of these authors wrote and applied them to interpreting, mentorship and interpreting, and other things like that. I highly suggest you get these books. They're amazing books. They're easy to read, and they really just apply to our work experience, our personal lives, and everything in between. Thanks for the feedbacks more about mentor-mentee relationships, I'll say, but the next 2 are really just about relationships and communicating and kind of just personal development. So in the end, this was a professional development workshop. I created a workshop for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, where my peers could come in and learn some things about interpersonal communication, hoping to engage them and motivate them to become a mentor. The professional development program actually requested that I create a course out of this, which would be either I get my colleagues together every week and we discuss tools and strategies on how they can actively pursue fixing their disputes or miscommunications in their everyday lives. So they asked me to create another curriculum to kind of have that focus. Right now, that's not in the works because I'm a little bit busy with other things, but I'm hoping next year fall to actually conduct this course where I can get a small group, maybe 10 interpreters, and every week we meet and discuss different strategies. Participants also receive CEUs. As I mentioned before, as we're a practice profession, to maintain certification, we do need to get continuing education units. And this workshop was actually validated and approved to give CEUs to my participants, which was awesome for them and for me. I just found that the conversations that we have in these discussions are really fruitful and help people become more engaged with each other in the work that we do, because often we're paired with another interpreter that we might not have met before. But if we're able to baseline understand how we communicate, and we understand that you might communicate differently, helps them kind of ease into that relationship more. I also wanted to mention that in our department of interpreters, there's 4 levels of interpreters. So think of the first level as beginner interpreter, can interpret most things, but wants or needs heavy support. And then level 4 would be very experienced interpreter, been working in the field for a very long time, can basically go anywhere and interpret anything. That's the goal of any of them. And then of course, the middle levels are everything in between. This workshop was not designed for level 1, level 4, or anything. It was designed for interpreters to come and discuss different ways of communicating. And that was reflected by the people who came in and actually took part in this workshop. Every level was represented, and also management was also taking this workshop, because I kind of mentioned to them that it kind of helps you help other people. If you're in a management role, you might be a mentor in some cases. So this can help you out with that. And lastly, I just learned a lot. I really found that I learned how to conduct a workshop, learned how to make a professional development workshop apply to everyone, especially in one like this that had such a wide, berth of things that I could discuss. People wanting to become mentors, maybe people who never considered becoming mentors wanting to now, or people who just want to learn more about interpersonal communication. I learned a lot about my own communication styles and help people do that for themselves too. So that, in a nutshell, is what I did. It was hard to kind of summarize everything into just this presentation, but I am now open for questions if anyone has any.
So Jase, I really enjoyed that. And in the spirit of your own research and in your, what I see as part of your personal mission, I would ask, did you collect feedback on the workshop itself?
Yes, absolutely. It's funny that you ask, because the workshop itself, the formal workshop, isn't actually happening until December 17th. So I had to be kind of creative in how to test this out first. So I found a group of people in my department who electively joined in without getting continuing education units to run the workshop the way that it was, have every bit of feedback I could. And then in the 17th, I will be presenting that with the feedback that I got from that practice run.
Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. So that's great that you got some pre-feedback or pre-workshop feedback. And then I would just encourage you to also collect feedback from all those participants so that you can also accumulate along with this. And it's great that they're interested in giving participants, credit, and that they want to incorporate it in the professional development course options. But it's also really great for you to keep some of that data, because that might be a next step for you. I think this is something that you should continue with in terms of your own research. Actually can see another career path or a dual career path for you. I think you've got some natural tendencies here. So certainly training and cheerleading and encouraging that interpersonal connectedness and vulnerability, I think, is an obvious skill. So I would just really encourage you to continue and collect that data right from the get-go. Whether that's, I know with a lot of the professional development courses, you fill out a form before you actually leave the room. So that might be something that you could do. So do you see, to make it a question, since I'm just talking now, but do you see an actual, a role, do you envision a role for yourself with something like this, continuing obviously your career in interpreting?
Yes, I very much do. Getting involved with the professional development program, I actually, before I ran this workshop, I got involved with the program itself. So I now help them not only conduct my own workshops, but I also help them conduct other professional development workshops. And I've learned a lot about that kind of conduit between workshop runners, leaders of workshops, and the interpreters that want to engage in them. So I'm taking on that role as well. And also my main goal in interpreting is to become a educator of interpreters. So all of this really helps foster that, that endeavor that I have. But I'm also thinking of taking this type of workshop and doing a traveling workshop. As I mentioned, nurses, teachers, they have events and, you know, big things that they have to go to. Maybe they go to a hotel and they have a whole weekend of professional development. And I can definitely see this type of workshop working in that kind of way, where I can go different places and travel and teach people these types of things and help them understand their own communication styles and that kind of thing.
And my last question is this the first of its kind specifically for interpreters?
I didn't do that research. I will say that there have been other workshops about interpersonal communication before. And when you're in the interpreting programs to become an interpreter, a lot of the discussions that we had here are, you know, discussed on the surface level, but this is just a more deep dive into those discussions because we need to know communication styles to be able to do our job. So this just applied more towards the person that's the interpreter versus the interpreting process.
Right. So that was really fantastic. So great job.
Thank you.
Hi, Jase. I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm not surprised that whoever it was said, you know, you need to make a course out of this, because there's a lot, obviously there's a lot in there that you could expand. And it also raises the question of, okay, so you're a presenter, a workshop presenter. Well, what's the difference between a workshop presenter and a teacher, right? So, I mean, and when you say you want to become an interpreter, go into interpreting education, I'm not surprised at all, because clearly there's a very straight line between the two. I had a couple of questions. First of all, communication, of course, is multi-level, and and Meg mentioned the word vulnerability. So, you know, things can get kind of hairy if you get down deep enough. And so I don't know if you know, in your trial run there, you got into issues where, you know, you can get kind of personal down in there, and I don't know whether that happened, or if it didn't, it probably will at some point, or at least you're always on the edge of that, right? I mean, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I actually want that vulnerability to be present in the workshop, because I want to engage in a safe space where people can kind of try things out and people can respond and can kind of be level-headed about that. I have some personal examples that I share first for people to understand that that's kind of where I want them to go if they feel comfortable to do that, because the examples that we have can always apply to everyone else. When we have disputes, typically we have disputes because we're triggered by something. And in the workshop, I couldn't fit it into my presentation here, but I discussed the triggers that we have when we're in discussions with people. When I get a piece of feedback that connects to my personal life, you don't necessarily know that, but my reaction shows you that I'm very upset with what just happened, but you don't know what's the trigger. So I discussed those types of things, and that's definitely a part of the workshop.
Right. I thought in one of your worksheets, when I think it said something like, when clarity is more important than honesty, or something, there it is. Can clarity be more effective than honesty? So, you know, that's an interesting question, because in communication, like you just said, you know, people don't necessarily know why they're communicating. First of all, you got to know how you're communicating and how it's affecting the other person. And then maybe you want to think about, well, why am I doing that? Or is this my style? Or is there or this is my style and this is the reason for my style. But in this particular case, there's also this other stuff going on that's causing me to think like this. So like I say, it can get pretty deep, and honesty is clearly a very important component to that. Self-honesty is as much as anything else. One last question. So I don't know if this came up in the trial run, but did people respond to the notion that what you're trying to do here, since you're just one person, you can only meet so many people, you're trying to get people enthused about the notion of mentorship and carrying that on in the profession. Did you get any response to that particular question?
The group of people that I worked with to do this, the people who are willing to do this, either, as you can probably assume, people who are willing to be a part of that trial run are going to be the people that lean more towards willing to do that in the first place.
Yeah.
So it was kind of more like, yep, I agree most of the time when I was hitting on those notes of become a mentor if you can, because they already are, or they're already willing to be that role. So that kind of thing, I did get response to that. It was well received, but it's going to take until the actual workshop comes to place where I can actually see if it does work with people who aren't initially. So I don't really have that answer quite yet. I'm hoping that when the workshop comes to place, some people who are maybe on the fence will be convinced to maybe become a mentor or to at least start thinking about that kind of role.
So when you talk about mentorship, when I first entered the profession, higher education, I don't even think that was a word, but I mean, people did fulfill that role, but not under the name mentorship, perhaps. And now, of course, it's a very popular role and people talk about it a lot. But I, in my capacity as a past administrator, I came to the conclusion that not everybody makes a good mentor.
Very true.
But first of all, there's things you need to be able to, it's a skill, right? But then it's not just the skill, the basic skill, it's how you relate to the particular person who's going to be your mentee. I mean, there's the application of the skill, but you don't apply it in the same way to everybody. And a lot of people aren't suited to be mentors. So I want you to think, don't try and get people who shouldn't be mentors to be mentors.
Absolutely. A discussion that we're having in our department right now is that exact thing, how to get people who should be mentors to mentor, and how to get people who maybe shouldn't be mentors, how to direct them into a different sort of avenue, or how to get them the skills that they could use to become a mentor if that is what they want. And that's kind of what I was tasked to do with this kind of workshop and the professional development course that they're asking me to run next year, trying to bridge that gap between people who want it and aren't quite there, and people who aren't there yet but really should be. So that's kind of where this is leading to.
Okay, so I will end with a comment that in 3 or 4 years' time, I want to see your name as an applicant for a faculty position in ASLI.
Wow, okay.
All right, it's a great presentation. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. This was a stellar set of presentations. I really enjoyed every one of them. Meg?
Yeah, absolutely. 3 really great presentations. I'm assuming for the most part, all of you are finishing up in December. And if that is the case, then congratulations and best of luck in wrapping everything up. A couple reminders. If you are able to attend, if you're here on campus and you're attending the symposium, just a reminder that that's happening December 2nd, and make sure that you have your poster sized and submitted as a PDF by the due date. And then just an additional reminder that you have 2 other papers that you have to submit, a product and a reflection paper. Those can be submitted to the same Dropbox. Just best of luck to everybody, and be sure to keep us posted on what you're doing and the great things that are ahead for you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Wendy.
So I think that was the best 3 yet. I have a meeting coming up that